set up the mechanisms and the procedures and approaches for successful implementation. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for that. In the year 2000, the Millennium Development Goals were formulated. Liberia was then in a state of conflict. And so it really wasn't until 2006 that Liberia began to be busy and to set about implementing the goals. The framers of those goals had 8. 7 of these were meant almost like dictation to the underdeveloped nations because they were prepared by technical groups, committees, officials of the United Nations system. And the 8 was meant for the developed world. You do this, this is what we will give you. Not clearly the kind of partnership that was meant for full success. Yet nevertheless, the SDGs were successful because countries did pay attention to them. It took a while, but they did, and each one set their targets. And indeed, some targets were met globally. We recall that the goal number 1, to reduce the level of poverty by 50%, was indeed met, although much of it came from some of the larger countries like India, like Brazil, and like others. Many of our African countries fell short, although many of us did indeed achieve a lot of success in many of the goals. Liberia, focusing on the 2 areas, other than poverty reduction, in which we really had a big problem, maternal mortality, child mortality, was very successful in being one of those that achieved much more in reduction. We didn't reach the target, but we made enough success to have been recognized as that which was one of those that achieved the highest level of success in the reduction. And of course, we did get recognized for women empowerment. In the other areas, much success, but not like we have wanted to in the 9 years that we had to make efforts. And so the process leading to the successor goal started, perhaps in Brazil, with Professor Jeffrey Sachs and those from the Earth Institute did a lot of work to start the first formulation of those goals. And the processes were many. Some of them have been recounted by those who spoke before me. But it was clear that it was not like, even though the Millennium Development Goals ended December 31st, 2015, but that we would look back at them and see how they could be improved upon, how we could carry them forward in an enhanced manner, how we could begin to stretch out and make sure that they represented not just technical inputs, but they represented people's own desires and people's own achievement for what they wanted the future world to be. And that's why when Dr. Duke talked about the robust consultation and the bottom-up, I think Professor Yang talked about that too. Exactly, said this time we're not going to set some, a group of people in a smoke-filled room and go and craft something. We're going to start with the people themselves. themselves. The world they want must be dictated by them. And so all over the world, our regional economic institutions, civil society, government. This is one time when it included everybody. The private sector has never felt itself one of the entities to participate in the formulation of development goals. I mean, they do their thing and make their money, we don't pay attention to them, don't pay attention to us except to pay taxes. But this time, we knew that unless the private sector, which for many of us is the engine and the catalyst for growth, unless we have them playing a prominent role, we are not going to get a maximum benefit from knowing indeed what was potentially possible to change this world. And so it included everybody represented in this room in one form or fashion. And after Brazil, the whole process is started. It led to, after the close of it, to Addis, it was mentioned, the Finance of Development Conference that set the stage, that established the mutuality of responsibility and the mutuality of contribution. That was well established. I think the Minister Cornett talked about that by saying no longer will it be, you do this and we give you the money to do it. You determine what it is, we determine it together, we determine it's good for the entire world, and we both put our resources into it, each according to his ability. And finally, climate change in Paris that talked about a new dimension not included in the MDGs. The changing world required that we address something that affects us all and for which we have no answers, except to identify the issues and see what approaches can be taken to be able to address them. In Africa, our own process was equally robust and dynamic. Our regional economic institutions took the lead, and they started the process. And Africa determined we have a long-term vision, Vision 2063. That vision says the world we want. And it asks all Africans participating in those consultations, what do you want your continent to look like so many years out? And those were taken and put together. Those of us who led the panels and the processes leading to the global agenda had a responsibility, heading the committee for the African Union, to ensure that the African aspirations and expectations were indeed taken into account as detailed in the Common African Position and were indeed integrated into the global agenda, the SDGs. That responsibility we carried out. And in Addis this weekend, I will be making my final report to say we were a 10-person panel. I headed it, but there were all the African presidents who were on the panel. And we all worked and exchanged ideas, and it represents the collective effort of all of us. So we will report and say our work has been done. Africa is indeed represented. Now we have to come to Liberia and how we can domesticate this. How can Liberia begin to start, like every other nation will be doing, in the next